$1.73 billion that are needed to for the response to the crisis that they were asking for today. How credible, reachable, and possible would you say that is?
How credible? Very credible, because it's based on very pointed needs assessments done by specialized agencies of the United Nations, including the OCHA, the Office of the Coordination for Humanitarian Affairs of the United Nations, which supports the organization of such conferences and ensures the collection of the data and the information. And so this is based on real needs assessments.
Right.
So in terms of credibility, it's extremely credible, and it's evidence-based. And in terms, what was the second question?
Reachable.
Reachable.
Reachability and possibility.
It should be. It should be. It's not impossible. I mean, we'll see the results. But the fact that there is so much participation means that it's reachable and doable. In terms of specific figures, I think I'll let Zainab elaborate on that. But the principle of credibility, yes, because based on evidence-based and needs and real needs assessments on the ground by credible institutions. In terms of doable, it should be doable because there is we see that there is a lot of political commitment.
Right.
And so.
Well, we're going to get to you in a second, but I just heard that we have a report from Ahmed Mekki from London. So stay tuned and watch that report, and then we'll be right back right after.
Your Excellency, first I would like to thank you for your time to come for this exclusive interview here with us on Kuwait television.
No, thank you. I welcome the opportunity. Kuwait has taken a real leadership role in this whole Syria crisis. But actually beyond that, Kuwait has taken a leadership role in humanitarian affairs in Africa, in Yemen, in the region. So it's very important that we work together.
Thank you, Your Excellency. First, we would like to ask you about the conference today. Could you elaborate on the importance of having such conference and alleviating the suffering of the people affected by the Syrian war?
Yes, it's a very important conference. It follows on from the 3 conferences that were hosted by the Emir of Kuwait, and that's why he's jointly hosting this conference this year. The fact is that we're going into the 6th year of this crisis, and we can't go on treating it as if it was an earthquake, a one-off, something that'll go away. It's going to go on, and we are asking the countries of the region, Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey, to bear a huge burden on behalf of the rest of the world. And they have to plan ahead. I can't ask the Lebanese education minister to take in another 250,000 children to his schools without giving him a commitment that lasts for next year and the year after, because he's got to employ teachers, he's got to build schools, and all those things. So we have to give a longer term commitment. So that's part of our ambition. The second part of our ambition in this conference is economic opportunities, jobs. We want Syrian refugees to have jobs. Now that is a very big thing to ask of countries like Lebanon, Jordan and Turkey. They've got their own problems with unemployment. So there's got to be an offer for them. There's got to be investment in those countries so that there'll be economic opportunities for the host nations and their workers and for refugees. So we're raising the bar, the level of ambition that we want to achieve. What we certainly need is more money. We don't want to be in the position that we were halfway through last year, where the World Food Programme suddenly announced that they were going to cut rations. We can't have that. We can't have people suffering in that way. There are 18 million people in desperate need. We have to help them.
وإنه ليسرني أن أعلن اليوم عن مساهمة دولة الكويت على المستويين الرسمي والأهلي بمبلغ 300 مليون دولار على مدار 3 سنوات لدعم سوريا، عاملين أن نتمكن من تحقيق الأهداف المرجوة ومساعدة أشقائنا وتطوير جراحهم.
Welcome back to our program focusing on the 2016 Supporting Syria and the Region Conference just held today in London. And I'm back with my guests, Zinab and Zainab. Let's talk a bit about Ahmed's interview. What are your reactions to Ahmed's interview? We'll go with you, Zainab, this time.
I believe that a plan should be developed, a strategic plan should be developed. However, there is already a plan existing. Looking at the magnitude of the crisis, there won't be a plan after the situation, the humanitarian situation in Syria stops, because it's still ongoing. Even if it stops, as Ms. Zainab said earlier, that even if we stop tomorrow, 30 years from now, we need to rebuild the entire community. So we do have a gap in education, we do have gap in economics, we do have gap in the community's resilience of how to empower themselves, or they would require that support. So to comment about the interview just now with your colleague Ahmed,
right.
Is that true? We do need a plan. However, the plan is 3RP, which still exists, that will address the coming years. As for the future years, that is not a decision that we make today. It's
Sure.
the government's decision to make.
Right, of course. Could you talk a little bit about 3RP before I move on? Because I don't think a lot of our listeners know what that stands for, what the summary of that entitles.
3RP, as I mentioned in the beginning of the interview, that 3RP stands for the Regional Resilience Refugee Plan, which is they start with 3 R's.
Right.
And a plan, the P stands for the plan. So 3RP is a plan that is constructed by collaboration between UN agencies. So in the beginning of the crisis, when you go to Syria Pledging Conference 1, you see that OCHA and UNHCR were chairing the pledging conference. And after Syria Pledging Conference 3, UNDP was joining the chair of the conferences. That's not because UNDP is holding a chair between UNHCR, is because of a reason, because of a very good reason. The complexity of the humanitarian crisis in Syria requires development to work side by side with the humanitarian relief and response.
Right.
Also, the refugee plan that is required for the upcoming years. So they worked, all 3 of them together. They launched the Regional Resilience Refugee Plan in Berlin last year. So this plan was developed which includes projects and relief that is required, and also plans for the refugees themselves in hosting countries or neighboring countries.
And with that comes like more tangible examples. For example, not just the ones you mentioned, but also like education and finding job creation for
Correct.
refugees. And with your background in UNDP, can you talk? UNDP? Yeah, I get them mixed up sometimes. I don't know how you guys keep them all straight. With your background in UNDP, can you talk a little bit about education, job creation, and how is this achieved, and how does this become tangible?
Well, I mean, these are specific programs, of course, and what the response is advocating, the response to the Syria crisis is advocating right now, is that we cannot rely solely at the moment on a humanitarian response, i.e. responding to the immediate needs of populations, that we need to accompany. This is a protracted crisis. It has been going on for at least 5 years now. This is a whole generation, as I said earlier,
Right.
which has missed out on its first 5 years of primary school, what we call a bit of the lost generation, if you like. So we need to pay attention immediately to the educational needs of the young Syrians, to the economic needs of the families, to the livelihoods, to job creation activities, to health issues and etc. So, I mean, that is, and this is mostly in the host countries, and I think your interview was addressing this, how these host countries for the Syrian refugees, whether it's Jordan or Lebanon or Turkey, do not have the capacities to satisfy all of these needs and to ensure all of these services to their own population, but also to people coming from outside.
Right, absolutely.
So that is why there is this call to support these host countries as well in this response to the Syria crisis, in ensuring the access of the refugees to education, to livelihoods, and
a lot of responsibility and a lot to ask of those host countries,
who already have challenges of their own.
Exactly. Well, we just got word that our correspondent Ahmed Makki has a report for us highlighting the fourth pledging conference for Syria held in London. Take a look and join us when we come back.
In London, with an urgent plea for billions of dollars in aid for refugees from war-torn Syria. His Highness the Emir Sheikh Sabah al-Ahmed al-Jaber al-Sabah's participation came out of his keenness to take part in efforts exerted by the international community to help Syrians caught up in the conflict and in dire need for living essentials.
Yes, it's a very important conference. It follows on from the three conferences that were hosted by the Emir of Kuwait, and that's why he's jointly hosting this conference this year. Kuwait has taken on a leadership role now in humanitarian affairs, and I want to work very closely with Kuwait as we go forward from now to the humanitarian conference, the World Humanitarian Summit that's going to be held in Istanbul in May. Because of the leadership role that Kuwait has, it now speaks with an authority on these affairs. And there's a huge reform agenda that we need to push forward, and I hope that we will see Kuwait use its voice with authority in these councils.
His Highness the Emir Sheikh Sabah al-Ahmed al-Jaber al-Sabah announced at the conference Kuwait's contribution of $300 million in aid for the Syrian people over a period of 3 years to help alleviate their suffering and hardship.
Well, first I'd like to thank Kuwait for generous donation towards the situation in Syria and the refugee situation. It follows after 3 years of very generous donations from the Kuwaiti government.
Addressing the conference, His Highness the Emir stressed that political solution is the only option that can put an end to the deteriorating humanitarian disaster in Syria.
I think the government of Kuwait, alongside the UK and the UN, deserve a lot of credit for recognizing there needs to be more aid for the region to help those countries who are bearing the refugee load, but also there's got to be a different kind of aid, long-term aid that recognizes the economic needs of countries like Jordan and Lebanon, Turkey to some extent, and recognizes that the humanitarian suffering of the refugees can in part be met by helping them to work and giving their kids education.
UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon held Kuwait's continuous support to the Syrian cause and thanked His Highness the Emir and the Kuwaiti government for hosting the previous Syrian donors conferences, which generated funds of about $7.5 billion.
Kuwait has been extraordinarily generous to the humanitarian work in Syria and in the neighboring countries. $500 million was given every single year, a little bit less this year, but still I think Kuwait is the country that is giving the most per capita.
The conference is also set to address the needs of some 6 million people displaced within Syria and more than 4 million refugees in other countries. Organizers want the aid to be diverted from food handouts towards work and education opportunities for Syrians in Lebanon, Turkey, and Jordan. Although these conferences can help significantly alleviate the suffering of the Syrians affected by the war, world leaders are aware that they cannot solve all these problems, and ultimately a political solution is needed to end the crisis in Syria. Ahmed Makki, Kuwait Television, London.
our program supporting Syria and the Region London 2016 conference. And thank you for joining us, and thank you, Ahmed, for that report. We'll get back to our questions now, back to our interviews. Zainab, as we know, UK, Germany, Kuwait, and Norway are co-hosting the conference in the United Nations. Excuse me. Could you please tell us what makes these countries special and why they were chosen?
The 4 countries that worked on Syria Pledging Conference 4 are considered the top donor countries, alongside with other than these 4 who are coordinating this Syria Pledging Conference 4.
Right.
They're also members of a group called Top Donor Group Meetings, which is a meeting that was established or suggested by UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon after the second Syria Pledging Conference. These small meetings are chaired by the UN Secretary General Humanitarian Envoy, Dr. Abdullah Al-Matoug, advisor at Diwan Al-Amiri, and the head of the chairman of International Islamic Charitable Organization. The meeting is consisted of 13 countries, donor countries, top donor countries, who donated more than 60 million in the pledging conferences. They sit and discuss how to do coordination mechanism. It's technically a coordination mechanism. They sit together and discuss how to come up with projects, follow up on pledges with other countries, and so far it has been fruitful. It helped gather most of the donations that have been made in Syria Pledging Conference 2 and 3, and hopefully it will continue in Syria Pledging Conference 4. So the top donor group is a mechanism where they can discuss, all these 13 countries gather in Kuwait, which was a generous offer by the Emir of Kuwait, His Highness the Emir of Kuwait, to host these top donor group meetings every 3 months in Kuwait. So let's see now after the 4th Syria Pledging Conference if we will continue to host them in Kuwait.
Right,
or in
what
London.
will come next.
The venue does not matter. Actually, the coordination mechanism what matters, and the follow-up on the pledges does.
Sure, that's the root of the whole thing. Excuse me. And we were talking during the break about the NGOs meeting that happens right before the conference. Can you guys talk a little bit about that really quickly?
Yeah. Well, the NGO support and solidarity is very important.
Absolutely.
Extremely important to the support and to any crisis, and in this case, the Syria crisis. So what usually happens before every pledging conference, a conference of the tradition was taken that a conference of NGOs is organized, and it's usually organized by Dr. Al-Matoug here in Kuwait, and where all the NGOs come and pledge their support. And the last one took place at end January, I think, sometime like that, just about a week before the London conference.
Right.
And there were some very significant contributions from the Kuwaiti NGOs and others from across the region and across the world. So this is a very important group, and it shows the solidarity of civil society in these causes and their important work.
It's always
of
a
course.
nice side to see, of course.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it shows that the whole society shares this concern. And it's not only NGOs, it's also the private sector, also individuals. So it's really a nice thing to see people coming through as groups or as individuals from various sectors to contribute to supporting addressing the needs of these populations.
Of course. Is there something you also wanted to add? I know you've mentioned something during the break on the NGOs conference.
Usually, of course, I would like to extend our appreciation and thanks to Dr. Abdullah Al-Matoug, chairman at the International Islamic Charitable Organization, advisor to the Diwan Al-Amiri, and the UN Secretary General Humanitarian Envoy for his great efforts throughout the past 3 years. He's been appointed as a humanitarian envoy since 2012, in November 2012. And he has continuously supported the UN agencies around the world. He's been a connector between the governments of the region with the UN agencies. He has opened doors and supported all the efforts and work made by the humanitarian sectors in the region. So the past 3 years, he has been hosting a meeting for all the regional NGOs for the NGOs in the region. They gather a day before the conference, usually before the Syria Pledging Conference, to do their pledges, and then it's announced during the Syria Pledging Conference. This year it was hosted on 28th of January, and a lot of NGOs from the region participated, which they gathered approximately 341 million.
Wow.
So this was announced during the Syria Pledging Conference. The NGO pledges will be not only the NGO, the Syria Pledging Conference, we will have to follow up as the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. We will have to, correspond with the governments of the ones who pledged, and then hopefully we will reflect that on a program called Financial Tracking Service, which is under the umbrella of OCHA.
Okay.
So this will be also as part of transparency between OCHA and the world. So at any point you can access the Financial Tracking Service to check the updated data.
Oh, anyone can check it?
Yes.
Fantastic. It's always nice to know, we see the big names that are, that kind of headline the conference, but it's nice to know the breakdown of the NGO conference the day before and who the quieter contributors are to the Syria Donors Conference. Well, this question is directed at you specifically in relation with your experience with the United Nations Fund for Women. Could you tell us how this crises like this specifically affect women and girls?
Well, women and girls, I mean, that's a very good question, because I think this is one of the biggest points of advocacy in terms in times of crisis. How women and girls are the most vulnerable in these crises. But unfortunately, what happens is that their needs are not addressed from the very start of the planning of the responses to the crisis. So what we try to advocate for in the United Nations and the specialized agencies working on women's and girls' issues is that we need to address women's needs from the very start of the planning of the appropriate responses. Because if women's needs, addressing women's needs comes as an add-on, it will not be very effective. The other issue
why is it so important to make sure you address that first, though? Maybe some people might not realize the trickle-down effect to making sure women and girls are protected in situations like this.
Exactly. It's for the sake of protection. It's for the sake of women. I mean, women and men, girls and boys have different needs, and we need to ensure that the needs of all the members of a population are properly assessed and addressed. That is the whole, so that we are able to formulate the appropriate responses. We need to build schools, for example, with separate bathrooms for girls and boys, because we know that if we don't have separate bathrooms for girls will not go to school.
Right.
Things like that.
Right. It's these little things that people don't necessarily think of.
And if you don't plan that from the very beginning, then you will not be constructing appropriate schools and appropriate.
Of course. Well, we just got word that we are now going to go to a report from our correspondent Salim Al-Ajmi on His Highness the Emir's speech at the 4th Pledging Conference in London. Take a look.
His Highness the Emir Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmed Al-Jaber Al-Sabah addressed the 4th International Humanitarian Pledging Conference for Syria in London, expressing gratitude to the United Kingdom for hosting the event and Germany and Norway for co-chairing the international gathering that was held in Kuwait for 3 consecutive years. His Highness said this conference complements the previous 3 events hosted by the state of Kuwait, as it helped raise over $7.3 billion, from which Kuwait has paid $1.3 billion to alleviate the suffering of the Syrian people who face the worst disaster in the modern world. His Highness the Emir said the effects of the Syrian crisis surpassed the region to reach other continents, including Europe, which was flooded by a large number of refugees, as well as some terrorist organizations that targeted a number of European countries. His Highness Sheikh Sabah added that the influx of refugees into Europe reflects the amount of suffering these people are going through, expressing gratitude towards the generous efforts by countries that are receiving refugees and commending the valuable efforts by the United Nations and its specialized agencies. On the latest developments of the Syrian crisis, His Highness reiterated that this humanitarian ordeal will not end without a political solution that puts an end to the bloodshed and restores stability to our world. His Highness noted that the UN Resolution number 2254 represented a glimmer of hope for all in restoring the unity of the UN Security Council to find a permanent solution for this crisis. His Highness hoped that the UN-brokered Geneva talks would achieve its intended results. His Highness called on the international community to offer generous pledges for the Syrian people to ease their suffering and help them overcome these painful circumstances. His Highness said that a new approach of providing aid is needed by implementing plans that ensure education for children, health care, and job opportunities for refugees. His Highness announced making a contribution by the state of Kuwait through government and non-government organizations by pledging $300 million over 3 years to support Syria. His Highness the Emir concluded his speech by thanking the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and his assistants, praying Allah Almighty that the bloodshed would stop and the hopes of the Syrian people would be realized with peace and stability in their country.
Wait until
وإنه لا يسرني أن أعلن اليوم عن مساهمة دولة الكويت على المستويين الرسمي والأهلي بمبلغ $300 مليون على مدى 3 سنوات لدعم سوريا، عاملين أن نتمكن من تحقيق الأهداف المرجوة ومساعدة أشقائنا وتطويل جراحهم.
Welcome back, dear viewers, to our live program on sponsoring Syrians and the Region 2016 London Conference. We're about to wrap up our live performance, and I just wanted to give a warm thank you to both of our guests. You've been such a wealth of knowledge, and I'd love to just hear any added points that you guys want to talk about, things that we might not know as viewers or people outside of the UN, a more personal statement, or anything that you want to address relating to today's conference.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting us and giving us the opportunity to participate and to express ourselves in this historic day, of course. I mean, this is a very important day for the work of the United Nations because it's through the support of countries like